If you're the smartest person in the room, smartest person on your street, move, leave, walk out, go into a different room. Bathe your mind in expertise and in energy and in knowledge. Everybody that I've talked to in here about goals and future directions has a bigger picture in mind for what they would like to bring into their world than what they currently are experiencing. So in order to get there, we need to bring more value individually, collectively, as a team, as a company, and begin to solve bigger and bigger problems for people. We will bring more value and compensation back into our lives. So how do we bring this value? We are going to study the craft. Study what craft? Well, essentially, we can get a little bit granular and go into some of these concepts a little bit more individual to each of us or our roles or what we want out of our goals in life as we look down the road a little bit with some of our 10X vision talk. But ultimately, regardless of what lens we look through it, we want to bathe ourselves and our mind in knowledge and expertise. So studying the craft is immersing ourselves in what it is that we do, just feeding our mind and surrounding ourselves with the energy of what is valuable in this world. So the premise here in Study the Craft as a foundational principle, as a section of our rocket, it really is about energy. So it is learning and sharpening your mind and your brain and your knowledge and your skill set. But what's more important to me, at least, what seems to be more impactful is the energy. When you are in the energy of those top 10 books that are in your field, when you are making connections or consuming content from those people that win awards for content creation, that win awards for lead production, that are the top salespeople in the world, in their field, in their organizations, you start to kind of get a little bit of that energy rubbing off. You start thinking a little bit differently, acting a little differently, questioning things a little bit differently. So a little deeper dive into that. If you read a book or two, a couple of techniques that I've learned and picked up over the years, and that ChatGPT makes even easier now, you find a book that you really like in your field as you're studying the craft, and it's like, whoa, this one's I like this. Go ask ChatGPT, what is every book that was referenced in the writing of and production of blank? And you write that book you just read, you'll get a list of 25 more books to read that are right there in that vein, right in studying the craft, which is awesome. If you're the smartest person in the room, smartest person on your street, move, leave, walk out, go into a different room, find somewhere that you can be stimulated to study your craft and truly be immersed, to bathe your mind in expertise and in energy and in knowledge that'll just keep you enthusiastic, growing, sharp. And again, it's not necessarily about your job or your role per se. It's more about you and really studying that craft of what it is that you want to do and how you can contribute and add value and solve problems. When I started a business in 2007, I had just come out of rehab. I was sleeping on my mom's floor, and that was great with 2 kids. Wife was super happy about those arrangements. I started a new business that I knew nothing about. It was hard to do this. It was a new business. It was digital affiliate marketing. There were no books. There still might not be very many books. Now there's a couple. But this was when this whole industry was just emerging and coming to be. There wasn't much to read. So I found a kid named Josh. We did everything over chat back then, like AOL Instant Messenger, Skype, before the days of Slack. So I had Trillion, which was like a tool that brought in several messengers into one application. And this kid had been on the job for about a year, and I was trying to do a little bit of business with him as I just started and realized that he wasn't way up the food chain, but he knew a heck of a lot more than me. So every time I had an acronym, I'd be like, hey Josh, what is this? So I'd be on the phone with somebody or chatting with somebody else or exchanging emails, and I would go to him repeatedly. And that happened multiple times a day for about 6 months, my first 6 months in that business. That's where I learned to study my craft with Josh. But I realized he was not going to continue to help me level up. So I found somebody else who was the manager of a team of 18 and right under the owner of the company. And that guy I found was somebody that I could begin to learn more, some of the nuances, some of the problems, a little more, I had the basics down. I could walk, I could talk. I was kind of like a toddler in the business at that point. So it was the next guy up the food chain that kind of took me through the next 6 months showed me how the business worked a little bit more, and I kept getting more and more questions answered. I got better and better at the craft. And then I noticed I started leveling myself up, and within about a year after the second guy, I noticed some of the lessons that I learned were on people's private jets. Let me tell you, it's way better than being on freaking Frontier. You know what I'm saying? Like, holy cow. As I began to have different needs, I continued to look for other resources where I could study that craft for more expert resources, more expert people, more expert guides to get me a little further. Because if I stuck with Josh smoking weed in his cubicle in Kansas City, I'm probably going to get a similar result. I love that soul. He was a nice guy and he helped me immensely. And I absolutely love him. He was not the one that I wanted to continue to work with as my guide or as my coach. Along with reading, along with coaches, look at everything that you can do to study your craft. Are there trade shows? Are there conferences? Are there coaching programs? Are there courses? Don't be cheap. Invest in yourselves. Invest in your journey. Invest in being the expert. Next section of our rocket. Choose to be great. So again, this might elicit things like, well, this isn't like my full-time thing. I'm not going to do this forever. I won't be here for my whole life. So I don't know that I really need to be great. And again, I would just kind of encourage you to choose to be great at life, at all things that you want to engage in, that you have some interest, passion, or any kind of a commitment towards. And it's the energy and perpetuity of continuing to level up. There's a saying, you're either growing or dying. But to know when you made that transition from growing to dying, it's really tough to know right there on the precipice of when that transfer happened, when it takes place. So if you always ensure that if you choose to be great, you make that intentional decision like, okay, no, I am going to go in. It begins to color a lot of things that you do, right? So all of your answers are totally right, and it puts you in an energy. $10,000 problems have the same level of stress as $100,000, which have the same level of stress as $1 million problems. And to get that, usually our biggest problem is we're just thinking small. Up at the top, your competition actually shrinks because almost everybody in society has been poisoned with toxic, low-level thinking. Regardless of what the problem is or the craft that I'm getting better at, there's a common element that keeps weaving its way through, and that is working with people. So I decided to expand my scope and get more into, I want my craft to be better management and effectiveness in dealing with people. Because whether I stay in this aspect or whether I go into more sales or whether I go into data management or whether I go in deeper into advertising, I'm gonna be dealing with people. So I kind of went back to my psychology class roots and pulled out some of my old books, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and read that 4 times a year for the next 4 years. And every time I noticed a reference to another book, I wrote that down and I read that other book too. Because it's a really easy book and fun book to read, so I read it a lot. That allowed me to continue to study the larger craft within the smaller by deciding that I'm gonna get good at this. Because as I did, wow, opportunities opened up and it was cool. Instead of going in there and trying to say, okay, what can I do? How can I solve this problem? What can I get out of it? I began to just adjust my paradigm because my craft became, how can I help these people? How can I solve their needs? And that changed everything. I'm wearing a $50,000 watch on my wrist that somebody gave me as a gift. I have a couple of them. And I'm like, whoa. That is very nice, and yes, I will take it, but I made a lot of money on that deal too. And then you get into the top part of the rocket here. Do it for others. That's when you can get an exponential return. When you start thinking, how can I help somebody else have a better experience? How can I solve somebody else's problem? You kind of get out of your own way to a degree because you've kind of sequentially come through these steps and you've begun to make some of those decisions in that order. Then when you get to others, you're thinking, what could I do to make their life easier? And that energy is just transformational. That's like, whew, that's coming from heaven, in my opinion. It comes from up there where we're here to serve somebody else. And the most ironic and crazy thing happens. The compensation factor that you get as a result of reaching that with earnestness, it blows away anything that you had previously imagined. So all those goals that you wrote down, those vision board things, if you jump on this rocket, that vision you will look back on in a few years and think, was I thinking? That was, please, that's child's play. I can do that in a month. It's magical. I don't always understand it, but I don't really always understand why the lights turn on when I flip the switch. I mean, I don't get the whole process, but that doesn't mean I'm going to walk around and stub my toes and run into things. I'm going to get the benefit of the lights. My thoughts are that if you know that this principle is at play and you're studying the craft, you've decided that you will be great, you are great, and that your worth is great, and now you're focusing on how you can help others because you know that's going to come back to you in spades, I think that's quite okay. But it's got to be genuine, and the only person that can really, I mean, that's between you and God, I guess. You know, like, are you really doing it to help others? And even if your motives, like, I've just found that to be true. Like, I'm going to go out there and serve. I'm not going to ask to get paid because I know that it will come back to me. And sometimes that's how I can white knuckle through like that first fake it till I make it phase. But then again, that transformation happens. And just think of how that applies to the people in your world. And writing in real names, I'm doing this exercise too. Like, how can as I'm doing this training, as I'm doing these things, I'm thinking of all of your faces and all of your names, because it helps me get out of my own way and say, well, I hope I do a good job, and say, I hope I can say something that applies to them. I'm reading a book right now called Love is a Killer, or The Killer App. I'm not sure, A or the. Particularly, he talks about reading, which I thought was interesting. And the way that he chooses the books that he reads are based on the people in his world and his clients, his cohorts, his colleagues, his personal circles. He wants to read and take notes so that he can add value to them. And I thought what a great example of doing it for others, is he's putting a lot of time and energy and effort into that. Another funny thing that just came to mind is he's saying, if a moron like me is getting ahead and all I have to do is read, like, what's wrong with you people? And he's pointing to like the CEOs, the executives. He's like, I'm just a moron. I didn't go to some fancy school. I didn't do any of this stuff that you guys did or have the stuff that you guys have. All I did was go to the freaking library. And you're allowing me to climb up that ladder and just nip at your heels. And all I got to do is read? Okay. And then he talks about it. He's sitting in an airport, not an airport, he's on a plane and there's a delay. And he looks around and he's like, you can see them. Most of the executives are downing their third drink, getting a little tuned up. Others are napping. And he pulls out his book. And he's got these success habits built in to when those moments show up. He pulls out his book and he's got his system and he's always got a book. He's always got something. And now he's got a fund that invests in other companies, and all because he read some books in his downtime instead of drinking when the plane was on the tarmac waiting to take off. Like, holy crap. That's why I use the word bathe. Bathe your mind in that energy and in that clarity and in that confidence, actually. If you're spending time chasing these top two, you will feel so much confidence surge in you. And Zach, that's why I can't tell you, oh, go do this and this and this and this. Like, you're going to have to chase it. Like, hunt that sucker, right? Call it in. You know what I mean? Like, really get with it. And as you do, that confidence will grow little by little, and you will feel like you couldn't be shut up. You will have, like, the song will erupt from within you. And magical transformations will happen. If I keep pouring this stuff into you, that everything that I can, if I give you my experiences and I can help you avoid even one of the stupid freaking missteps that I've taken, well, there's a lot of them. That list is long. Then it's a win. And I know that I will keep winning if I can be a little bit of service to you in that regard, whether you're here, there, or anywhere else.